Always trust.
We ask the question, what is needed in the world? Is that going to
U bogatoj karijeri dugoj 4 decenije napredovao je do pozicije admirala grčke mornarice i donedavno glavnog savjetnika za nacionalnu sigurnost grčkog premijera Kyriakosa Mitsotakisa. O napetostima između Ankare i Atine, militarizaciji grčkih otoka i strateškoj važnosti Mediterana za Al Jazeeru govori admiral Alexandros Diakopoulos.
Now, Admiral Diakopoulos, hello and welcome to the Al Jazeera channel. Thank you so much for taking time to speak to us. Now, let me start by asking you, given the long genesis of the maritime disputes, why is the Eastern Mediterranean such a strategic and consequently such a contested area between so many different countries?
Yes, Eastern Mediterranean is geographically very important from a strategic point of view area, because there are at least two very important choke points for international navigation. And I'm talking about the Suez Canal and the straits, the Black Sea, the straits, Dardanelles straits that connect the Mediterranean with the Black Sea. Now with maritime commerce being so important for the world economy, you understand that a country who controls not only the choke points, but the sea lines of communication has a great strategic advantage. Now, have in mind that apart from the geographical part, there is the part of Eastern Mediterranean being the crucible of different civilizations, is where three continents meet and so many different cultures and countries. You have almost 9 countries around the Eastern Mediterranean. You have Europe, Asia, and Northern Africa. You have Islam and, I don't know, or Christianity and all these sectarian differences that, and so many, and of course, Israel and all these conflicts, internal and external conflicts. And this is why Eastern Mediterranean is so contested and so important for the big powers.
Right. Now, Admiral, we see a very periodic flare-ups between Turkey and Greece. Now, how would you assess the most recent verbal escalations?
The most recent verbal escalations, these are, we have and we're facing now a very belligerent rhetoric on the part of Turkey. I mean, how more explicit can it be? It's a naked threat. I mean, when the President Erdogan says that we might come suddenly one night, I mean, can you imagine? And have you seen anything? I mean, I haven't seen anything analogous or relevant anywhere else. So why is that now? Maybe there are many reasons. I believe that most of the reasons are that, first of all, in 2023, there's not only the elections, which is very important for President Erdogan from many aspects, but you have the centenary of the Turkish Republic. And maybe they want to have a big success or something for the centenary. Then I think it's his relation, he's reorienting his relation with the West and the other great powers. I mean, not only West, but China and crucially and especially Russia. So in this concept, probably he wants to use his position and his power as a bargaining chip vis-a-vis his relations with the United States mainly. And I think Greece is indirectly a victim of his dialectic and his difficult relations with the United States. And of course, you have, we talked about the elections, and of course you have his problems with Greece, which are a little bit structural problems. And Turkey was always using, this so-called coercion diplomacy against Greece. Turkey was pushing pressure to Greece. And maybe now they feel that this is the time they have to push to the end. Because as we talked about Eastern Mediterranean before, Greece and its islands, if you see the geography, is what stands as an obstacle to the implementation of this strategic fantasy of the Mavivatan or Blue Homeland.
Yes, Admiral, we'll come back to the Blue Homeland in a second, but before that, let me ask you, we have seen how the maritime dispute between these two countries, Greece and Turkey, centers on disagreements over the boundaries of Greek territorial waters, ownership, exclusive economic zones, and ownership of certain islands, Greek islands in the Aegean Sea. Many years have passed since the Lausanne Treaty, when some of these islands were handed over to Greece. Why do you think Turkey still lays claim to these islands? Why are they so strategically important to Ankara?
Yes, Turkey laying claims to islands is relatively a new thing. I mean, with the Lausanne Treaty, everything was resolved, and if somebody knows history, they will see that during the 30s, there were even warm relations between Greece and Turkey, between Venizelos and Kemal Atatürk and that stuff. That was the agreement, that was the international agreement that defined the relations and the status quo in the area. Now, especially after the 70s, Turkey started becoming a revisionist country. And it's part of this revisionism that Turkey wants to annulate somehow the Treaty of Lausanne, or to annulate the effects of the Treaty of Lausanne. What changed in the 70s was the new UN Convention of the Law of the Seas, the UNCLOS, and of course the new technological capabilities to have the energy resources from the bottom of the sea. So at some point, the bottom of the sea, which in the 1920s and 1930s was not something so important, became strategically very important. And the only way that Turkey could take part of this was by becoming a revisionist country and trying to find a way to change in practice, if not in the letter, but on the ground, the Treaty of Lausanne. Have in mind that till 1996, we never heard about disputed islands or gray zones or whatever, because in the beginning, in the 90s, Turkey said that there are some islands who are undefined regarding their sovereignty. And then suddenly they decided that they're not undefined, but they belong to Turkey. But this is very messy stuff. On the bottom line is that Turkey is a revisionist country and wants to change the effects of the Treaty of Lausanne.
Right. Now, Admiral, let me ask you, Greece has rejected Turkey's demands on demilitarizing Aegean islands. We have seen how Greece has recently shipped armored vehicles to Lesbos. Why does Athens consider it necessary to have a military presence on these islands, some of which are only a few kilometers away from Turkish territorial waters? And does Greece understand Turkey's concerns when it comes to Greek military presence in these islands?
I mean, if you mean that Turkey is concerned that Greece is going to use the islands to invade Turkey, that's, I'm sorry, that's part of a joke. And if you listen to their belligerent rhetoric when they say they didn't take their lessons in 1922 and we're going to throw them on the sea again, whatever, or who will come suddenly at night, this is not a rhetoric of a country who is afraid that we're going to invade them. It's rather a rhetoric of a country who is threatening to invade. So let's come to this demilitarization issue. The islands of the Aegean, they have we have to group them in three groups with different militarization or demilitarization status. First is the islands around the straits, namely Limnos, Samothraki, Agios Evstratios. These islands have been demilitarized initially, as initially they were demilitarized the Turkish islands of Imbros, for example, or the Turkish straits. The straits, I mean the Dardanelles. What happened was with the Montreux Treaty, this demilitarization status was lifted. And it's explicitly written in Montreux Treaty that all the previous treaties are annulled, and now what is in force is only the Montreux Treaty. So according to Montreux Treaty, there is no demilitarization status for these islands. And Turkey, as you know, has militarized heavily all the area, the straits and the islands. So it's very Turkish to have fully militarized its part, but demand demilitarization on the other part. Now, if we go to the islands of the Eastern Aegean, these are not completely demilitarized. Supposedly, according to Lausanne Treaty, Greece is not allowed to have fortifications, naval bases and that stuff, but they can have a military force over there. And then you have the Dodecanese, the islands that Greece came to Greece after the Second World War. They were Italian, and they were demilitarized on the demand. Turkey is not a signatory party, but they were demilitarized on the demand of the Soviet Union for their own purposes, the Soviets. But we have to say two things regarding this militarization or demilitarization status. First, that it's an anachronism. Many places in Europe, I mean, in the borders of Italy and Austria, for example, or in the islands near Sicily, there are many places in Europe that were by treaties demilitarized. Nobody gives now nobody cares about it because this demilitarization status was for the previous century and the beginning of the previous century. And this is something of the past, something obsolete. And nobody cares about it because nobody has revisionist ideas about getting back its previous empires. This is the first thing. The second thing is that the islands are really under threat, or at least if you take in the word of what the Turkish politicians are saying, they're explicitly threatening to invade. During the Ergenekon process, Balioz and that stuff, if you remember, we saw that there were plans, real plans of the Turkish general staff for invasion of Greek islands. I mean, and we know very well, especially after the invasion in Cyprus, and when there was potentially a Greek-Turkish conflict, that the Turks would invade the islands, and that was the big problem for the Greek defense at the time. So when you have just near you a country which is revisionist, a country which explicitly threatens you, a country that overflights your islands in a regular basis, a country that has the biggest landing fleet just 2 miles from your islands. I mean, have in mind that Turkey, in Izmir area, they have an army corps called Aegean Army Corps, a huge army corps, and the biggest landing fleet in Europe, which is just next to Greek islands. When you have the invasion in Turkey, when you have all these things, how can you leave your islands unprotected? I mean, do you know any country in the UN who would leave its islands or its territory unprotected when the other country has made explicit plans and has the army and the material over there to invade and then move?
Admiral, now let's go back to the blue homeland, which you earlier mentioned. Now, the blue homeland doctrine is a rather imprecise and unofficial geopolitical concept which was coined many years ago by Admiral Cem Gürdeniz and Admiral Cihat Yaycı. But it has become mainstream in Turkey over the last couple of years, so much so that it has been de facto accepted by the government as a policy. What is your view of the blue homeland, the Mavi Vatan doctrine, and do you see it as a threat to Greece's interests?
Yes, if you see you have to see the map. In terms of law of the seas and international law, blue homeland is a monstrosity, and especially when you combine it with this so-called memorandum that Turkey has signed with the government in Tripoli, the Turkish-Libyan memorandum, which is a diagonal memorandum. I mean, you have a delineation of exclusive economic zone which goes diagonally. I mean, according to the international law, it's the opposite country or the adjacent country, not another country in diagonal way where the lines pass over the Greek islands. But right. They even did that. So if you see the blue homeland incorporates half of the Aegean and all the eastern Greek islands that Turkey wants them demilitarized, but they are incorporated in the blue homeland. Look at the map. It's very interesting to see that. And then the half of the Eastern Mediterranean. If Turkey managed to impose the blue homeland, we would have some very interesting effects. First of all, Greece would be cut off from Eastern Mediterranean and would be cut off from even the Eastern Aegean islands. The second effect would be that Turkey alone would have the full control of the movement of the Russian fleet from the Black Sea to the Eastern Mediterranean. Because imagine, it's like a safe with two keys. One key are the straits. The second key are the islands in the Aegean. So if the Russian fleet, let's say, has to pass through Aegean, it has first to pass through the straits and then to pass through the islands, where it can be easily, destroyed in case of a war.
Right.
Now, Turkey wants to have both keys, and the Eastern Aegean and the straits.
Right. But, now, Admiral,
yes.
When you say, these traditional sources of friction between Greece and Turkey and Cyprus, they dovetail with interlocking geopolitical tensions. How would you describe Greece's relations with Egypt, with Israel, and with the United Arab Emirates? Over the last couple of years, we have seen increasing military cooperation, joint military exercises between, Greece, the Emirates, Israel, France, and Egypt. Yeah, and these countries at the same time are in very bad relations with Turkey.
Yes, there are two parallel things and somehow interconnected. Greece always had good relations with the Gulf countries and, of course, with Egypt. This is traditionally good relations between our countries. Going back in history, if you like, even the ancient history. And, of course, in a volatile area like the Eastern Mediterranean, when, as we discussed in your first question, there is so much instability and conflict, of course, you need to have good relations with the countries. And this, if you want my opinion, provides stability to the system. Now, all these relations, and the fact that Turkey at some point had bad relations with all of them, has even pushed the other countries to group together and to strengthen, if you like, and deepen their relations. But these are just good relations with the aim to provide more stability in a very unstabilized and volatile area. These exercises that you talk about, yes, but they're not, you have exercises with friendly countries all the time. That doesn't mean that you have an alliance or something more concrete in terms of security.
Now, Turkey has long aspired to become sort of an energy hub or corridor, if you like, to Europe, between the Middle East and Europe. It has signed the various oil and gas agreements with Azerbaijan, with Iran, with Iraq, with Russia. Do you see any ways Turkey and Greece can cooperate with this issue, with gas pipelines crossing Greek territory from Turkey across Greece towards the Western Europe?
Yes, of course. And to some point, there is such a cooperation because we have the pipeline coming from Azerbaijan and traversing Greece.
Right.
So there is some cooperation, and I wish we could have more. The thing is, of course, Turkey wants to become a hub. And I think every country wants to become a hub because this has economic and geopolitical benefits coming with that. The thing is that for Europe's sake, and you see what happened with Russia, have in mind that Russia is doing its best to advance Turkey's claim to become a hub. And now they have proposed even more pipelines to come from Russia to Turkey to supplant the Nord Stream 1 and 2 that have been idle at the moment. So the problem for Europe is that, okay, you have Turkey as a hub and everything, all your energy needs pass through Turkey. And you have Russia. Now with Russia, you have a big problem. And Turkey has this ambiguity in its behavior, where sometimes it's a partner and sometimes it's adversary. And for Greece, sometimes it's even worse. Don't you need for energy security some other more secure ways to have energy? I mean, you can have both. You can have the pipelines coming from Turkey and some pipelines coming from Eastern Mediterranean. But if you see as a whole, Turkey's policy for becoming a hub and the blue homeland, that means that Turkey wants to have the full control of all the pipelines, of all the energy resources, of the sea lines of communication. And that would give enormous leverage to Turkey vis-à-vis the Western Europe, and with the blue homeland, enormous leverage vis-à-vis Egypt, vis-à-vis Israel, and vis-à-vis Russia. So for Turkey is strategically important, but this strategic aim passes through the Greek sovereign rights and even Greek sovereignty that right. Turkey is now contesting.
Now, Admiral, I mean, if you watch, Turkish state TV and channels which are close to the government, you can often see maps of Greek military bases and U.S. military bases shown in a rather menacing manner towards Turkey. Now, I've seen similarly on some Greek TV channels similar maps being shown. Now, the symmetry in their security narrative and siege mentality seems to be astounding. How do you make sense of all that?
Yes, but it doesn't make sense. It's only in the narrative that the United States is an adversary of Turkey and uses Greece to, I don't know, to invade Turkey or what. The thing is much simpler. And we have to see it both from the Greek point of view and the US point of view. Let's take the US point of view. In the Second Gulf War, Turkey denied the right to the American army to pass through Turkish soil.
Turkish territory, yes.
That was the first thing. And then you had all this saga with the S-400 and Turkey buying the S-400 in the end, ignoring US whisky and that stuff. Now, Turkey, who used to have bases, and when these bases, like in Çelik, were in Turkish soil, everything was okay. I mean, they were okay to have bases in their soil, but they have problem with the bases in the Greek soil, which is not very, to my mind, that is not very logical. So when the Americans felt that maybe Turkey is not so safe or they need to have alternatives, they thought of Alexandroupoli as an alternative to the Straits. Now, for Turkey, the problem of Alexandroupoli is a double problem. First, Turkey's mentality is a zero-sum mentality. So they believe that if Alexandroupoli takes some geopolitical importance, this geopolitical importance is subtracted from the Straits, are for them. So this is the first problem. And the second problem is if they ever had any plans, I don't know, for the Western Thrace, the part of Thrace which belongs to Greece. Now you have the Americans and Alexandroupoli near their borders, which is an obstacle to them. So This is why they're so much annoyed by this. But for the United States, it makes a lot of sense because now, with the Montreal Treaty, the straits are closed. So all the equipment and the army that goes to Eastern Europe, and namely Bulgaria and Romania, passes through Alexandroupoli. So it was, from the strategic point of view, it was a very wise decision to have the base over there.
Mm-hmm. Now, Admiral, I would love to continue talking, but we have run out of time. I'm afraid we'll have to cut it short here. It was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much once again for speaking to Al Jazeera.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. Thank you.
Always trust. We ask the question, what is needed in the world? Is that going to be